registered to vote. And they needed 1.5 million valid signatures. So they did, make sure to get extra signatures. They had some 2 million signatures, but many are not valid for a number of reasons. Person might have moved from the registered address. They may have signed totally differently. And unlike the election, in an election, when you sign your vote by mail ballot a little differently, we'll send you a letter and we give you a chance to, update us or tell us that that's your signature and that's what you're using. But a petition, we don't do that. But as I say, they had plenty of signatures. The next step is withdrawing your signature. And I'd say people could send a letter to the county elections office, email or call. Well, they had to show a signature, so they would call for info. They had till June 8th to say, I want to take my signature off the petition. And county election officials have still until June 22nd to report how many people from their county want to withdraw their signature. So that's something that there's, again, that could have been enough signatures where, no longer would we do a recall. That's pretty unlikely. Here, San Mateo County, we received 3 requests for signatures to be withdrawn, and that's out of nearly 19,000 signatures we received. So it was a very, very small percentage. So we don't really expect that there's going to be a change because other counties get bigger numbers. Now, one of the things, as Mike Levinson brought up, is the election date. The earliest possible election date, I understand, and Michael Louie, correct me if it sounds wrong, is the earliest possible is August 24th. San Mateo County would have to mail ballots like at the end of July. So that's pretty fast. A more likely election date that's been talked about is September 14th. And again, we would have to mail ballots about a month ahead of time. There have been some new developments in the last week in the state legislature, and that could result in a later date. I'll get to that because it's sort of like, I'll go through more of the mechanics before I talk about this, why there's a new development, what's going on. I hope you'll bear with me. The cost of the recall is something that's been discussed in the media, that the counties all reported what they see their cost will be for the election. And total, that's like $215 million. Now, that doesn't include whatever expenses the Secretary of State will have. They publish the voter information guide and mail that when it's a statewide election. And, they'll have other expenses. The state first of all, each county reported, and we reported about $4 million is the cost for San Mateo County for the election, and I'll estimate it. The state's not required to reimburse the counties for the cost of the recall, but it's being considered with a call to include $215 million in the state budget. The recall right now, it's covered under current election codes, and it's requiring that we would have 11-day and 1-day vote centers. That we have, let's see, and again, it'll be like, a certain number of, you have at least one vote center for every 30,000 registered voters. That we don't, if a jurisdiction where the special election is held, like say Woodside or Portola Valley, perhaps, well, it's not the jurisdiction there, I guess, but as I say, they're a smaller place. And let's see, we have to be open 8 hours a day. We're going to have plenty of drop boxes. The last election, we had 39 drop boxes and people really used those. This time we're going to have 45 and we're going to have 35 of those will be outside locations. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 are drive-up locations. I really like the drive and put my arm in and drop it. And I can share our very, as I say, things are subject to change right now. So the Vote Center team and Dropbox team have said it's okay to share with you the tentative list. They say, please don't publish it on your websites. I mean, you can refer people to us if they want to talk about it. It's just one of those things that things could change and we don't want someone to say, well, you told us, it would be. So we plan to have 3 30-day vote centers. And that is what we have done for, many, many elections. We have here in the registration and elections division, we'll have voting. That means we'll have the ballot marking tablets out in the lobby. We can print you a ballot if you don't want to wait till your ballot arrives in the mail, or you made a mistake and you want to get a new ballot. In addition, the same locations will be at the Assessor County Clerk Recorder office in Redwood City, and will be at the main library in South San Francisco. Now, we plan to have an additional 5 open at 11 days. 11 days is including Election Day. And again, those will all be locations we've used before. I'm not sure if it's called the Pacelli, Michael Pacelli Event Center in Daly City. And we have the Lewis and Joan Platt YMCA, East Palo Alto, the Emergency Operations Center in Half Moon Bay, St. Peter Parish in Pacifica, and the main library in San Carlos. After that, I'm not going to list the long list, but I'll share with you, we'll email afterwards, because we have another 14 vote centers. And instead of doing 1-day locations, we're going to do 2-day locations. So at that point, at the election day before, those sites it'll be a total of 22 vote centers. And with all these vote centers, it's only one location we have not been to before. So we're really familiar. They are places that worked in the November election. So all a good thing. At least, we're familiar with it, and we're hoping the voters still are. Now, the new development that I mentioned is Assembly Bill 152. And that began as a budget bill in January. And it was amended by the state Senate on June 11th. And it was to require that the gubernatorial recall election be held as a regular election. Now, that's different than calling it a recall election, basically. It may mean, and again, this is my interpretation right now, and Michael will correct me if some of it is, yes, we've all talked here at elections, but in order to try to answer, think of the things you're going to ask me about, I thought I'd get ahead of you. It may mean that we'll have the 4-day vote centers instead of 2-day vote centers. It may also mean we have to have more vote centers. Budget estimates would have to be recalculated because it's obviously more expensive to have it as a regular election with more vote center days and hours and more locations. And if the budget estimates have to be recalculated, there needs to be more time before the election can be held. It can't be like August 24th or whatever, sometime in late August. It will mean it'll more likely be a September election. And really, to me, finally, is the election administration plan. We're working on a supplement to the January 2020 through January 2024 election administration plan. And that's what we did with the November 2020 election. We had a supplement because we had to say, we're doing things with COVID in mind, things are a little different, and we want to explain that in the EAP. You'll have 14 days to comment on the supplement. We'll email you a link to the location on our website where you can see it. There will be a form you can click and say, comments, or you can send a separate letter. And we'll announce the opportunity to review the EAP on our website, and a press release and public notices that are in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And I don't know if I've covered everything I could think of about the, upcoming election. Michael, anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you, Sarah. I think you did an excellent job covering it, and it was quite extensive and thorough. I just wanted to speak on and answer Mike Levinson's question about, for those of you who maybe weren't in the meeting in the beginning, mentioned some rumors of some county registrar of election officials basically petitioning or communicating to the state to delay the push to have the recall election as early as September, pushing it back to maybe October or November or even December as the original projected dates would be, due to a paper shortage. That was the main concern. The more specifics on that. So yes, there are concerns that have been communicated to us by our paper vendors. The paper is not necessarily for the ballots in terms of paper shortage for ballots, but more specifically about envelopes. So as some of you are aware, there's only a handful of certified paper printers and mailers for official election materials in California, and they have strict timelines and deadlines that they need to, of course, supply and ramp up for elections. So they were initially understanding that the election would be sometime in around November or so, and then just maybe a month ago, there was a rumor that it was maybe going to be in September, as early as September. So they're scrambling to secure their supplies if that is indeed going to be the case of a September recall election. And it's more of just a logistical thing. Obviously, the monetary and budgetary concerns about running an election of this size, surprised it's not a regularly scheduled election, is a valid concern for many county election officials, but the hardest part is logistics. Just the short time frame that we have to prepare for these elections. It's the ballot creation, the testing, the deployment of equipment, the outreach. All that takes time, and supply size for our vendors, even more time and lead time needed to adequately test and prepare and supply on their end. So that's the main concern, is logistics. We've been working really hard and closely with our paper vendor and ballot envelope vendor, K&H, and they supply, I think, half of California or maybe more. LA County is one of their vendor, not vendors, but their partners, and obviously that's millions and millions of ballots. So it's just putting a strain on our processes and our logistics on our end. So we're working really hard to kind of communicate those concerns that we're having to Secretary of State and at the state level, so they understand it's you can't just pick any date out of thin air. There's a reality that plays into fact here, and we just want to make sure we're all on the same page so we can support the process and support our voters adequately. guess we can open it up for some questions, Petra.
I already have one from Marni and David. Marni, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. It's Marni Rubin from the League of Women Voters, South San Mateo County. Thanks so much, Sarah and Michael. It looks like when we do our outreach, that messaging should definitely be, when the election is, that there is an election, and then all the, different vote centers, ways to vote. Will there be any messaging about voter education on what it means to recall or not recall? This idea that, if you would like to recall, that's a yes vote, and then you have to vote for someone else. The fact that voters might be confused about that. Any messaging about that?
Oh, I'll jump. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Just simple. Absolutely. This is difficult for even election officials to understand. I can imagine, the average voter trying to wrap their minds around what is a recall? Why is this happening? Why is it happening on this date? What do I do when I get my ballot? I mean, the common question that we are already receiving is, okay, so I get the first ballot about, do I want to recall the governor? When's the second ballot coming? Oh, no. There's two questions on the ballot. So they're not dependent on one another. You can vote, you can answer each question independently. So if you vote no for the first question, do you want to recall the governor? You can still pick the the replacement governor on that second question. So it's absolutely going to have an extensive voter outreach campaign and materials sent out. There'll be an info page in our sample ballot and voter information pamphlet explaining very succinctly what is the recall process and how do you go about doing that. We're also going to have a phone bank to answer questions, but the more we can front load and outreach on the front end, the better. So we don't have to be reactive in terms of a phone bank approach for voter outreach. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
And I think you got it covered. I mean, it's sort of like when we did the presidential primary last March, we had to explain about parties and which party you could be and get another ballot. So I think that went pretty well. I think people, we did like a 1-page flyer in different languages trying to explain, what your choices were. And I think, we'll try something similar. We'll be doing the voter education workshops in 6 different languages and one for our population of persons with disabilities. And we'll have things on the website in addition to the voter information pamphlet, flyers, and all of your help in explaining it. And we hope you'll post at least a link on your website.
Thank
Maybe
you so much.
David. Sure.
David?
Oh, thank you. Just a small question. I'm not quite sure I caught this, Sarah, from your comment or your presentation. There's a lot of drop boxes that have been, bolted into the ground, around the county. And are those going to be? Is the plan to generally take advantage of those and unlock them for as drop off ahead of the election? I like, for example, San Carlos the library is going to be a drop off point, but then the the ballot drop off box is around the corner,
Right.
On San Carlos app. So I was curious, what the general thinking of was around that.
Well, definitely when the cities that chose to keep a drop box, bolted in, those cities, towns, locations, if they agreed to bolt it in, we basically said you're going to use it for any future elections. So that, I think, any place that's bolted it in. Also, there have been some places that said, even though we bolted it, I mean, we had known up front, they weren't going to be able to keep it year round at that location or didn't want to. And, there are costs involved, and probably, we work with them on that, but there were some that were taken away, but they'll be reinstalled.
Thank you, Sarah. Valerie had some questions in chat that I thought were good, which is just about the historical data on turnout for recalls. So there's only been one recent recall, Gray Davis?
Well, that's the one in recent times. So that 2003, 2009, what was it, Michael? 2009? Three. And, but I mean, there's something like there have been 50 attempts to recall governors over the history of California, but most of those did not go to election. They didn't get enough people to say we want to recall. But so the recall is different. People aren't expecting the election. People aren't familiar with this idea so much of, vote to keep, Governor Newsom in office or not. And then the second question of, well, if he's not in office, here are your choices, pick one. So yeah, there aren't a lot of things for us, I think, in recent time to go back to.
Yeah, I kind of just agree that most people don't even really remember the last recall. So I don't know that it's historically relevant. Valerie also wanted to know if you guys are going to be making videos, or if the state is going to be making videos.
We don't know about the state. We had a meeting with the state. All the counties were able to join, and we all expressed our, from an outreach point of view, the desire to have things from the state. So that way it's one message all over the state when it's something confusing, like the recall. And also that they spend money on the advertising and let us know where they're advertising, so we don't book the same, TV station, newspaper, or whatever. And that way we stretch our outreach dollars a little further. I think from our point of view, the time is just, there's not a lot of time, but if you're interested in doing a video, send us a link to our Twitter account. We'll, as long as you're not derogatory, indecent, other than that, I mean, we'll be happy to share any videos that anyone else wants to put up by doing a link to you.
Thanks, Sarah. So the next thing that we're going to talk about after our legislative updates from Diane, is going to be sharing all of our individual outreach. So Diane, sorry, any other questions on the recall?
Mike.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. If the date is still unknown for the recall, is there still a rule like X days ahead of time, or once the date's announced that candidates have to file? Because that was one of the paper-related issues they brought up, as if there's a two-page ballot.
Might let Michael, because he works with candidate services also, he's the supervisor for that unit, answer that question.
Good question, Mike. Yeah, there is we just found out the requirements yesterday for running as a replacement candidate. So basically candidates have to obtain petition signatures. It looks like 7,000 is the threshold set for them. They have to file a filing fee as well, and provide some income tax returns filed with the IRS.
For 5 years.
Level, 5 years. That was a new one. I didn't know was a requirement. So very short time frame on their basically the filing period for candidates. Again, the lieutenant governor has basically up until like 60 to 80 days before an election to call the election date. just giving you guys kind of comparison contrast, the candidate filing period is usually 113 days to 88 days. So that's the usual time candidates have to file their paperwork and circulate their nomination papers. They can't do that until obviously we know of an election date, and then only until after that, then there's the candidate filing period, which is still an unknown to us and how long it is. It's we're still waiting for the official guidelines from the Secretary of State so that we can update our materials. We usually put out a candidate guide. We probably will put out an abridged version for this election and go from there. But the requirements we just found out yesterday in terms of the timelines and deadlines, we're still waiting on the official calendar from the state. So once we know it, we will publish it on our website for all to consume and read.
So you're basically saying that replacement candidates just need to file as soon as they know they're interested.
Absolutely.
Because if the governor has potentially as few as 60 days to announce a date, you're already past the 88 days.
Yes, we at 60 days, usually we mail our overseas ballots by then. So usually we have our ballot completely created by 6 days before election day. So it's more stress for us. We're just rushing as we're working long nights to get this done.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Levinson, I just want to, you mentioned for the governor to pick a date, and actually he is not involved in the picking of the date or administration of this election. It's the lieutenant governor in the case of the recall of the governor.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, any more questions about the recall? This is going to be either way an opportunity for a lot more voter engagement and voter outreach. So it's something we get to take advantage of and just getting people involved in elections. So we'll look at it as a positive and not light. Diane is going to give us some legislative updates, and then after that, we're going to spend the rest of the time kind of sharing what everyone's plans are for outreach, especially in relation to the recall election. So Diane, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been tracking a number of bills that are going through the legislature, and so I'm just going to give you a quick update. So the first one is AB 37, which was the bill by Mark Berman that essentially extended some of the provisions that were put in place for the November 2020 election, making those go forward into the future. So essentially a subset of some of the Voter Choice Act requirements, such as mailing a ballot to every registered voter. And also the one thing that it did in addition to VCA is it extended the time within which a ballot can be returned and counted. So they're expanding it from 3 days to 7 days. So basically it did pass the state assembly on May 27th with 59 yes votes and 16 no votes. And it's been referred to the State Senate Committee on Elections and Constitutional Amendments. So that's where it is right now. It went there on June 9th. So I'm sure we'll have more information at the next meeting. The next one that I've been tracking is SB 503. I think I got the number right this time from Josh Becker. This is related to voter signature verification. And there had been some issues raised about concerns that the legislation could be easily undone and some additional requests for privacy. So basically, there have been some amendments put onto the bill, including instead of just allowing one election official to reject a signature, if that election official rejects a signature, 2 additional election officials have to also review it. So they're basically putting a higher bar on rejecting signatures. Because again, the presumption of this bill is that a signature on the ballot is valid unless proven otherwise. So that's kind of the general thinking of it for this legislation. And it also added some amendments saying things like, acknowledging that people's signatures change over time, that people may be signing the ballots quickly, so their signatures might not exactly match. So again, it's a pretty high standard where you essentially get 3 people have to all say the signature doesn't match before you can reject that ballot. You also have to provide information to the Secretary of State about the number of ballots that are rejected and why. So it did pass. The last time we met, I think it was stuck in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, but it ended up passing that committee. It did pass the state Senate on June 1st with 31 yes votes and 8 no votes. And it's now been referred to the State Assembly Committee on Elections. So that, and they actually just learned this morning, they amended it this yesterday in the State Assembly Committee on Elections, basically adding some language that if it was impractical to inform a voter on that business day or the next business day that their signature doesn't match, it gives the elections officials a little bit of an out that if they can't practically get back to the voter that quickly, that they're not violating the law. So as far as I could tell, that was the only additional amendment. So again, it was referred back to the Committee on Elections in the Assembly yesterday. Another one I started tracking is AB 796, which is the new motor voter program. It essentially just expands on the existing motor voter legislation that's in place. And I think mostly what this bill seems to be doing is, first off, it's in response to some legal issues that have come up regarding how well the DMV has been able to ensure everyone who has any interactions with the DMV have an opportunity to register to vote. So it sort of codifies some of those provisions. The other thing it also does is it requires the Secretary of State and the DMV to establish a task force to evaluate the motor voter program, and that each agency, so the Secretary of State and the DMV, each have to designate an employee who will essentially monitor this program. So that bill actually passed the State Assembly on May 27th, and it's been referred to the State Senate, both the committees on elections and constitutional amendments, as well as transportation, I think, because since the DMV is involved. So that one is moving forward as well. Let's see, a couple others that we had talked about a couple of months ago, SB 90 and AB 1416, which had to do with how ballot initiatives were described on the ballot. Both of those bills had hearings set and canceled by the bill's author. So nothing's really happened with that right now. I don't have any information as to why the bill's authors, because again, two different bills, one in the State Senate, one in the State Assembly. They basically were, the hearings were scheduled in April, but they were both canceled. So we will see. And the other one, which I think we already sent out some information about, the AB 339 about continuing access to public meetings through the internet and or telephone access. And, it did pass the State Assembly, but with so many amendments, it pretty much watered it down, where it now only applies to jurisdictions with 250,000 residents. So basically it doesn't apply to very many jurisdictions. So it also removed some requirements for simultaneous translations, as well as you don't have to provide telephone and internet access. It's one or the other. And then the final amendment was this whole thing sunsets December 31st, 2023. So it wasn't even a long-term solution. So that's where that one stands. And that's my update on all the legislation going on related to voting in California. Any questions?
Anybody have, any questions for Diane? I have a couple other updates in our tangential.
Yeah, this is Mike. I'm going to look it up while the meeting's going on, but I was told by a couple of people that are advocating for AB 339, the government or open meetings extension, that it was basically amended by the local government chair, who's a representative from the Sacramento area, but I'll have to look up her name. And they don't know.
Yeah, well, so Michael, basically,
I can update that one.
Yeah, I mean, the organizations that raised a lot of concerns about this bill were basically a coalition of local government associations, including the League of California Cities and Counties, And the issues that they raised in terms of the way the bill was originally written was they were concerned about the cost and the technical challenges of providing this access. So Petra, if you have more to add to that.
Well, the bill basically, they watered it down. So I'm just going to bring it down to our county. So it's under 200, only for cities more than 250,000, which is basically means nothing for us except for the county level. But on the county level, we can make our own decisions, both counties and cities, as to how we want to continue this. So we're actually going to, Yahaira and I are going to be meeting with this bunch of city clerks who are working on figuring out what the future is, what they're going to be doing locally. So we're just hoping that it's going to go for local decisions, because there's nothing we can do, I think, about strengthening the bill at this point, because there was too much influence from the leagues of cities.
Right.
So,
Right, and they didn't know, the authors at least didn't know if they were going to try and start a new bill over again, or actually oppose it and make it a 2-year bill by not having it get rejected this year.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been referred to the Senate Committee on Elections. I'm sorry, the Senate Committee on Rules to decide which committee that legislation will be assigned to. So it's now in the state Senate. So I don't know if it makes sense at this point to like talk with, Josh Becker, our state senator, to say, maybe this isn't a good thing to waste our time on, because it doesn't really apply to most jurisdictions in California.
I know.
Diane and Petra, can I just mention one thing on this legislative note before we get off this particular piece? We've been begging, for lack of a better term, our local representatives from Kevin Mullen and Josh and everybody else, Jackie and Anna, to please move forward and help us with the Secretary of State, educating our new Secretary of State regarding election system security and software issues. And we've just had no luck, and we believe it's because of the intellectual property consortiums, and namely Microsoft and others at the top, pushing back against open source software. And when we see all the hacks throughout the country in business, it's basically the same issue. You can't secure these systems that are legacy and running on this antiquated software, being proprietary. So if there's any thought within our group here of helping with this issue, I just posted in the chat, the Republicans are now taking the lead. A guy by the name of Matt Brainerd, who's got a group called Look Ahead America. He's a Trump supporter. They're now taking the lead because they figured out, which they didn't figure out before, about the black box that actually counts the votes. The software that counts the votes is a flaw in the current systems. So to see the Republicans now moving forward, I won't say they're hijacking this issue, but they figured it out. And the Democrats, who used to lead on this issue up until Microsoft put the kibosh on the work of Deborah Bowen and previous Secretary of State and Alex Padilla. Now we've got a new Secretary of State. If this group could be so bold as to make comment to the Secretary of State saying, we do not want Microsoft software counting our votes in California. We want more public oversight there, so we shore up the security. Yes, we want paper ballots, and yes, we want audits, but the piece that's always left out is the software that actually counts the ballots. So if we can just shore this up, we'll set the tone for the rest of the country. And that's probably the best work well, I won't say it's the best work, but it's certainly a contender for the best work this group could do, is mentioning to the new Secretary of State, let's not kowtow to Microsoft. Let's take control of our vote counting software, and we'll set the benchmark for the rest of the United States. So this is something that is not in a bill. We had a bill 1784, AB 1784 previous, but it did not. It turned into a 2-year bill. If we could rally around this, there's no other way to avoid the catastrophe we had in 2016, obviously,
Brent?
where there was issues, and now 2020. If you're a Democrat, you thought we did pretty good, but then they stormed the Capitol over this issue.
Brent, wait, before you get political, we can't do that here.
Okay.
On the Democrat and Republican side. But first of all, I appreciate that you're bringing this up. I appreciate that you put that in the chat. If you have a sign-on letter or some more information that you put in the chat, I'm happy to make sure that everyone sees that.
Yes, and I appreciate the focus of this group, but this is just one piece that continues to be left out because of corporate interests. So we need to get to our politicians and say, we appreciate corporate sponsorship of politics, but we have to get this vote counting software proper.
So please put in chat any links to information you have about that so we can start looking at it. Jack, you've had your hand up for a while on legislative stuff.
Yes. So on AB 796, I just wanted to add a little bit of context to what Diane said. My understanding from talking to some of the advocates is that it's basically codifying like a court order that the DMV and the Secretary of State's office had after the initial failures around implementing the registration, so that this would make, you know, basically the staffing decisions as well. So the DMV has to have a person, you know, that has a responsibility for managing the automatic voter registration and everything like that. The other thing I was going to add, I can't remember, Diane, if you mentioned this, but as far as I understand, the advocates believe it's going to come up in the Senate hearing. Senate elections hearing, which is next week, and I think it's Tuesday of next week. But I can look up the exact time and see if it's posted on there.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't write down all I knew is what date it was referred to the committee. They don't post when the hearing is going to be held.
Yeah, for sure.
At least through the legislative database that I use.
Leginfo, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really user friendly.
So,
and then the other thing I was going to say about AB 339, you know, very disappointing that the amendments really removed a lot of the kind of robust potential that was there. But, you know, I guess kind of like looking on the bright side, you know, I think the 250,000 person cap does provide an opportunity to really look at cities side by side and demonstrate, you know, the impact of this legislation before the sunset date at the end of 2023. So hopefully, I've been trying to figure out if there's any academics that are interested in, you know, evaluating this side by side, and we're having conversations with a couple of different folks later in the year. But I think that could be a really powerful case study to see, you know, like Chula Vista and Stockton, which are basically the same population, whether or not, you know, there's any difference in public participation because of this law. So.
Jack, I know some people who are really interested in having their students study that in public policy. So get with me about that. I can connect you to some Stanford people. In addition to all of that, locally in San Mateo County, the budget is going to be presented in the next couple of days to the Board of Supervisors. So I assume that the Elections Division, I don't know what day you guys are going to be presenting the proposed budget, but if anybody wants to comment on it, do you know which day that will be?
You put me on the spot. I have to look at the calendar. Yes, we are working for that and preparing for that budget meeting. It's all basically a management team has been focusing on in recent weeks. But I'll post it in the chat once I can find the date.
Or maybe Linda or Judah know.
Petra,
I'm looking it up. Stay tuned 1 second.
Thank you.
Petra, just to chime in on that one piece of purchasing more election systems for San Mateo County. This harkens back to the point I just made. These systems that they're selling are antiquated technology. We should not be buying more of the bad systems that are causing all the civil unrest. We should move toward the better systems. And Jim Irizarry, on behalf of Mark Church, we've put him in conversation with the Secretary of State on that point of figuring out how to trial run the open source systems in San Mateo County so that we're pioneering better security systems rather than just spending our money on the crappy systems that we know don't work properly that are currently being sold. So that's that same issue that I'm putting in the chat.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like at the budget hearings would be an appropriate time to make public comment. So we'll, sorry, did Judah or Linda know what day elections is presenting? Putting the pressure, oh, there you go. Scheduled to present the budget on Wednesday, thank you. So if anybody wants to be there. Again, to question to the elections office, is it helpful if the VEOAC is there saying, hey, don't forget outreach money for us?
Well, we do have outreach money, sort of booked. My understanding is, and I think Jim presented at the last VEOAC meeting, that there was $700,000 for the 2 elections during this fiscal year, which is the recall and the June primary. We don't have a budget for the next, general election, but that's still being, I don't even think they're covering that. Is that right, Michael?
Not to my knowledge.
And, we won't spend as very much of the money, I'd say, on the recall outreach compared to what we'd spend on the primary outreach. And also we'll have more time to do outreach for the primary because we'll know the date. We know the date right now. I mean, it's a June 2020, the first Tuesday, 2022. So we can, maybe it's, groups can do a double attack, but, talk about the recall and the June primary, but that one seems so far away right now.
Okay. There was another question in the chat, which is there a great place to track this legislation from Mairin? Diane, you just really do a lot of legwork, don't you?
Well, no, actually, there is a really good place to go to. And I think Jack also mentioned it. It's Ledge Info. So basically the state legislature, you can go to, I can put it in the chat, the link. And what you can do is you can set up an account and track specific bills so that whenever there is a change in the status, you get an email. That's how I knew this morning that there had been some additional action on SB 503 because I had just gone in and checked them all yesterday, and then this morning was like, oh, something else happens. Oh, okay, here I put it in the chat. So it's a great place to go. And again, you can either have push notifications sent to you or just periodically you go in there and you can find out, you can get the text of the bills, you can get analysis of the bills, you can get the history. I mean, it's a great thing. And as I said, you can sign up to track specific bills so that you get emails when something has changed.
Thank you, Diane. That's super helpful. Any more thing, last chance on legislation before we move on to the next thing, which is outreach. So I'm going to, in advance, excuse myself, I'm going to get off at 9:45 because I have to prep for the redistricting, which you guys are all invited to. But what I'd like to do is to just do a quick kind of popcorn introductions, because we actually have some new people, which is fantastic. And so for people who haven't spoken yet, I'm actually just going to call on you to make it fast and just say like very quick 2 sentences about who you are, where you're from and what the primary thing is that you're working on right now. And then we can get into some more discussion about that. So I'm going to go with people who haven't spoken first, and then we will go back to the people who have. So Betsy.
Yes, I'm in League of Women Voters, South San Mateo County, working with Marni Rubin on voter outreach.
Thank you. Dirk.
Oh,
Are you?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is Dirk van Olden. I'm generally very interested in the whole voting process. I've worked at the various vote centers for years now, and have been interested in how the actual mechanics are behind the voting system. And I was particularly interested in one of the comments that dealt with the software that's being used to count the votes. And I will be participating again, hopefully, in the next vote cycle. I find this particular area of the county government extremely interesting, and I find the people that work there are so dedicated, it's almost scary. So that's why I'm interested in participating in this meeting. So particularly
Great.
Sarah, I've met her a couple of times already. They are just a fabulous staff over there. So, and I think we're in very good hands with them. Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk. Ray?
Thank you, Petra. My name is Ray Larios. I represent the San Mateo County Latinx Democratic Club. I live in Burlingame, and nice to see all of you here today. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, and also hello to all the new people.
Marjorie.
Hi, yes. I have the same reasons for my interest in VEOAC as Dirk. Very interested in all election issues and outreach.
Terrific, welcome. John Burnett.
Did you say Brent, Petra?
I did, probably.
Oh, thank you. Okay, my name is Brent.
No,
Turner.
sorry, I said John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll get to you. John Burnett, are you on? You're muted. So we'll come back to you. Mairin?
Hi, everyone. I am Mairin Macaluso. I live here in San Mateo County, but I consult to an organization called the Leadership Now Project, which is focused on, engaging and mobilizing the business community and others nationally to weigh in on how our democracy is functioning. And we're involved at a state level in a number of places, ranging from New York to Texas to Wisconsin and Georgia and more. And we do have members here throughout California. So I'm trying to get a little bit more educated on what's happening at a local and state level, so I can engage our members in key issues, especially around sort of voting and voting rights, which is near and dear to our hearts as an org.
Thank you. Elsa. Elsa, can you unmute yourself from the phone? Okay, we'll come back to you. Mitra.
Yeah, similar to Marjorie, I am a San Mateo County resident and very interested in the sanctity of the elections and getting more information and seeing how we can preserve the software counting, those kind of issues to make sure that we have faith in our elections and that every vote is counted.
Thank you. Glenn.
Hi, my name is Glenn Olson. I'm with the Immigration Institute of the Bay Area, and I'm focused on voter outreach and education.
Thank you. Pam.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to all the newbies. I have started out as being a voice, so as a resident in the Bellhaven neighborhood. I belong to several organizations, including the League of Women Voters, and I mostly represent Menlo Together.
Great, David.
Hi, David Pollack. I'm a resident of San Carlos, and I'm just interested in the myriad of ways that we can get more diversity and inclusiveness across the all the populations of the county, not only in voter registration and voting, but also running for office.
Thank you, David. Jack.
Hey everyone, I'm Jack Marni, Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I have been working with Petra and Diane and the elections office on election cycles in the past, and I'm looking forward to continuing that partnership to make sure we get robust outreach.
Okay, so I'm taking over for Petra. Valerie.
Hello, my name's Valerie Morishige, and I'm an organizer with Field Team 6. And for currently what we're working on, we've been postcarding to let folks know about the recall election, also gearing up to start doing in-person voter registration as soon as that's safe in all counties, and also starting a new project where we're trying to show up at naturalization ceremonies across the country so that it's not just the official folks that are registering people, but that there's also volunteers there that can answer more pointed questions that sometimes the elected officials can't really answer.
Okay, Marni.
Hi, it's Marni Rubin. I'm with League of Women Voters, South San Mateo County. And we are focusing this year on voter registration, of course, especially in underrepresented communities, particularly Latinx and Spanish-speaking communities, and with high school and community college students. So any collaborations with those particular areas, we're focusing on Redwood City, the Bellhaven neighborhood, with Pam Jones, and also East Palo Alto. So we'd love to work with everybody. Thanks a lot.
John. Bernat. John. Okay. All right, we'll come back to that later. Linda Wolin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Linda Wolin. I'm with the Office of San Mateo County Supervisor Dave Pine, and I've been on the VEOAC, I think, since the beginning, and work on voter education and outreach efforts on behalf of the board, and also kind of making linkages to education and outreach to all our vulnerable communities on not just civic engagement, but that also sort of translated into COVID outreach, census outreach, vaccine outreach. We've kind of working on trying to perfect our communications and outreach mechanisms.
Michael Levinson. Michael, you still on the phone?
Sorry, I wasn't unmuting properly. So I'm with several organizations, the Paratransit Council in San Mateo and Center for Independence for Individuals with Disabilities, Board of Directors. So I've been with the VEOAC, I would say, for the last 3 or 4 years. I was originally on, and still am, on the VAC, which is how I got interested in the VEOAC. That was one of our earliest suggestions because we had such little outreach capability on the VAC that we thought it would be better to have a separate committee, and it's existed ever since.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that hasn't yet introduced themselves? I think we got everyone, but please unmute if I've forgotten you.
Diane, it's Brent Turner attempting again.
Okay, so yeah, so again, we're just doing introductions and what work you or your group is doing on voter outreach.
Yes. My name is Brent Turner. I'm from Redwood City, proud graduate of Roy Cloud Grammar School. And there must be something in the water at Roy Cloud because we breed good activism. And my group, California Association of Voting Officials, is working currently as a liaison between San Mateo County and the Secretary of State's office to educate both parties regarding election system security and software. And as I mentioned, we're attempting to get trials held in San Mateo County for the upgraded technology voting systems that are surrounding based on open source software. So I'll put more in the chat on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John, Bernat, are you still with us? Okay, anybody else that I've missed that's still on? Yahira, is there anything else left on the agenda? I don't have it in front of me.
No, just the share out piece, and that was it.
Okay. Okay. Well, we don't have a date yet, I don't think, for the next.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do? Okay, thank you. So Sarah, please tell us, when is the next VEOAC meeting?
Well, Michael, was it July 16th at our usual time?
I'm verifying that right now.
And so our usual time is 9 o'clock. Again, we started early today because of the back-to-back Zoom meetings with the redistricting.
I think that's
So we'll just wait for Michael to confirm that date, and then we can just say our goodbyes and see everybody next month.
I think it's the 14th. Yes, so I think it's July 14th then.
Okay, so July 14th. July 14th at 9.
Do you have that agenda in front of you to confirm, see that date? It was at the bottom of the agenda. But of course, we'll send out lots of reminders.
Mm-hmm. Right.
My agenda says July 21st at 9.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So July 21st at 9 a.m. Obviously, when we send out a follow-up to this meeting, we'll confirm the date. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you next month.
I think we do generally meet third Wednesday. That's the thing.
That's correct. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.